The city throbbed with its midday pulse, a cacophony of distant sirens, rumbling traffic, and the murmur of countless conversations. Yet, stepping across the threshold of AUM was like entering a different dimension. The heavy glass doors hissed shut, sealing off the urban clamor, replacing it with a profound, almost reverent hush. Outside, hurried pedestrians jostled on sun-baked sidewalks. Inside, cool, climate-controlled air carried the faintest scent of expensive leather and subtle, exclusive perfume. Tom Cruise, a figure deliberately muted against the expected gleam of celebrity, paused just inside, allowing his eyes to adjust. He wore a uniform of determined anonymity, a soft, unassuming gray t-shirt that had seen better days, a pair of classic blue jeans faded at the knees, and a well-loved baseball cap pulled low, casting his famous features into shadow. It was a conscious choice, an attempt to navigate this space as an observer, not a spectacle. The interior of AUM was a masterpiece of calculated opulence. Vast slabs of Italian marble, polished to a mirror shine, reflected the intricate network of spotlights embedded in the high ceiling. Each beam was meticulously aimed, transforming the watches displayed beneath into objects of almost sacred desire. They rested on beds of deep midnight blue velvet, within climate-controlled glass vitrines. Chronographs gleaming with polished steel, divers' cement, watches hinting at underwater adventures, dress watches whispering of boardroom power. Gold, platinum, titanium, ceramic, materials formed into miniature engines of time, each seemingly vying to outshine the last. A few other patrons drifted through the space, speaking in low, confidential tones, their own expensive attire and quiet confidence marking them as members of this rarefied world. Staff, clad in impeccably tailored dark suits with discreet golden AUM pins on their lapels, moved with a silent predatory grace, their eyes constantly scanning, assessing, categorizing. Instantly, Cruise felt the subtle shift in atmospheric pressure his presence caused among the staff. Glances lingered a fraction too long, professionally neutral masks, barely concealing flickerings of appraisal. Then, dismissal. He saw a whispered exchange between two employees near a far counter, a shared, subtle smirk. He ignored it, letting the judgments slide past. He wasn't here for them. He moved deeper into the store, his gait unhurried but purposeful, his gaze sharp and focused beneath the cap's brim, sweeping past displays of merely expensive pieces. He was searching for something specific, though perhaps even he hadn't fully defined it yet. Then he stopped. Before him lay the main display reserved for the store's crown jewels, and centered there, under its own dedicated halo of light, was the watch. It wasn't just the shower of diamonds pave set around the bezel and across the bracelet lugs that caught the eye, but the sheer presence of the piece. It radiated complexity, precision, and an astronomical price tag that was felt rather than seen. Cruise leaned slightly closer, his interest palpable, genuine curiosity cutting through his deliberately low-key facade. He stood there for a long moment, simply absorbing the details of the extraordinary timepiece. He appreciated the evident craftsmanship, the confident lines, the balance between ostentation and engineering. He barely registered the approach until the reflection shifted in the glass case. One of the senior employees, taller than the others, with an air of self-importance radiating from his perfectly knotted silk tie and razor-sharp suit, had detached himself from the periphery. He had likely been observing Cruise for some time, perhaps confirming his initial assessment with a colleague before deciding to intervene. He stopped a respectful yet pointed distance away. His eyes, cool and appraising, did a swift, practiced inventory. Worn cap, simple shirt, faded denim, practical footwear. The calculus was immediate and unflattering. A microscopic lift at the corner of his mouth betrayed his thoughts before he even spoke. "May I assist you, sir?" The tone was smooth, professionally honed, yet lacked any genuine warmth. It was the sound of duty, not welcome. Cruz finally pulled his gaze from the watch, turning slightly to meet the employee's eyes. He didn't remove his cap, didn't offer an ingratiating smile. He simply nodded towards the display. "This watch," he said, his voice even, quiet, but carrying the inherent authority he rarely needed to force. "I'd like to know more about it, please." The employee's posture stiffened almost imperceptibly. A flicker of something, surprise, annoyance, crossed his features before being smoothed away. He leaned forward, feigning the need for clarification, though Cruz's gesture had been unambiguous. "This particular model, sir? The pièce de résistance?" The emphasis was subtle, yet patronizing. "Yes," Cruz confirmed, his gaze steady, unwavering. He held the employee's eyes for a beat longer than comfortable, a silent challenge issued and ignored. "The details." The employee straightened up, folding his arms across his chest in a classic gatekeeping posture. The faint smirk returned, more confident now. "Well, sir," he began, drawing out the syllable, "while it is undoubtedly a magnificent piece, I'm not entirely certain it aligns with the profile one might typically associate with this level of horological investment." He let the implication hang in the air. "Perhaps," he continued, gesturing vaguely towards a display of less extravagant, though still costly, steel sports watches. "Something from our more accessible collections might be more suitable, robust, practical." Cruz remained still, his expression unreadable beneath the cap's brim. He could feel the familiar heat of frustration begin to prickle, but years of intense focus and discipline allowed him to maintain an external calm. He registered the slight sheen of expensive pomade in the employee's hair, the glint of a gold cufflink, the polished shine of his Italian loafers, symbols of the very luxury he was being implicitly denied access to. The irony wasn't lost on him. He simply returned his attention to the diamond watch, effectively dismissing the employee's suggestion without a word. The silence stretched, amplifying the employee's condescension. The employee interpreted the silence as confirmation of his assessment. He emitted a soft, put-upon sigh, the kind reserved for dealing with difficult children or the hopelessly naive. "Allow me to elaborate, sir," he said, adopting the tone of a patient tutor. "This isn't merely a watch, it's a statement. A limited edition, one of only 5 produced globally." He paused, letting the exclusivity sink in, clearly expecting awe, or perhaps intimidated withdrawal. It features a fully automatic, chronometer-certified Swiss movement, housed in solid 18-karat white gold. The diamonds, of course, are VVS1 clarity, meticulously set by master jewelers. He spoke the specifications like a sacred text, yet his eyes held a distinct lack of respect for his audience. "It represents the pinnacle of our brand, an heirloom piece for a very discerning and, frankly, established collector." He clearly felt he was wasting his breath. Cruz finally looked up again. His blue eyes, though partially shadowed, seemed to bore into the employee. The quiet intensity was startling. "Tell me about the movement's complications," he requested, his voice still level, but the underlying steel was now unmistakable. He hadn't asked about the diamonds or the gold. He'd asked about the mechanics, the heart of the machine. The employee faltered for a split second, thrown off by the specific, knowledgeable question. It momentarily disrupted his narrative of dealing with a clueless admirer. But he recovered quickly, irritation flashing in his eyes. It has several complications, naturally. He waved a dismissive hand. Perpetual calendar, moon phase, standard for this caliber. He clearly didn't intend to elaborate further for someone he deemed unworthy. He leaned in slightly, lowering his voice conspiratorially. Frankly, sir, the maintenance alone on a piece like this requires a significant commitment. May I see the watch? Cruz asked again, the request now sounding more like a quiet command. The employee's carefully constructed patience finally snapped. His eyebrows shot up in exaggerated disbelief. See it? Handle it? He chuckled, a short, unpleasant sound. With all due respect, sir, we can't simply remove pieces of this value from the display for casual inspection. Store policy. Besides, he added, his gaze pointedly dropping again to Cruz's attire. Are you genuinely in a position to consider such an acquisition today, or is this purely academic curiosity? The air crackled with tension. Cruz held the employee's gaze, the silence stretching taut. Then, slowly, deliberately, he spoke, each word precise, devoid of heat, but heavy with implication. The price isn't the issue. Your assumptions are. Now, are you going to show me the watch, or do I need to speak with someone who understands customer service, regardless of appearances? That was the final straw for the employee. His professional facade crumbled completely, replaced by open scorn. He gestured broadly at Cruz, then around the opulent store. You know what? I believe you've wandered into the wrong establishment, my friend. AUM is not a public gallery. We cater to individuals who appreciate and can afford true luxury, serious buyers. He smirked. Perhaps try them all. Cruz's eyes narrowed, a dangerous glint appearing within their depths. And you decided I'm not serious based on my shirt? The employee shrugged, folding his arms again, reveling in his perceived authority. Let's just say experience tells me you don't fit the usual profile, sir. You're wasting valuable time, mine and yours. Cruz took a slow, deliberate breath, the kind one takes before making a final, irrevocable decision. He adjusted the brim of his cap almost thoughtfully. It seems I'm not welcome here, he stated, a profound disappointment coloring his quiet tone. He looked past the employee towards the door. Thank you for demonstrating AUM's renowned service. The sarcasm was subtle, but cut deep. He turned, his shoulders straight, and began walking calmly towards the exit. Do come back when your circumstances improve, the employee called after his retreating back, unable to resist a final venomous barb. He watched Cruz go, a triumphant, smug grin plastered across his face, convinced he had expertly handled an inconvenient interruption. The heavy glass door sighed shut behind Tom Cruise, leaving a silence in the showroom that felt suddenly heavy and uncomfortable. The employee remained poised near the display case, arms crossed, savoring his victory. He straightened his tie, mentally congratulating himself on protecting the store's rarefied atmosphere. His self-satisfaction was short-lived. From across the room, near the main counter, where she had been discreetly finalizing a purchase, a well-dressed woman gasped audibly. Her eyes were wide, fixed on the door Cruz had just exited. Her hand flew to her necklace. Good heavens, she breathed, her voice carrying in the stillness. Wasn't that Tom Cruise? The name, spoken with such odd certainty, ricocheted around the marble-clad space. Heads turned. Other customers exchanged wide-eyed, questioning looks. The employee froze mid-smirk. The blood drained from his face, leaving it a sickly pale. What? He stammered, blinking rapidly, as if the words didn't compute. Tom Cruise? The actor? He looked wildly from the woman to the door, then back again, disbelief warring with dawning horror. At that precise moment, the store manager, alerted by the sudden shift in atmosphere, or perhaps summoned by another staff member, emerged from his glass-walled office at the rear. He was older, impeccably dressed, with an air of smooth, controlled authority. He surveyed the scene, his gaze sharp, immediately sensing something was amiss. The woman who had recognized Cruise hurried towards him. "Mr. Sterling," she exclaimed, gesturing towards the door. "That man who just left, the one your employee was so rude to, that was Tom Cruise, I'm absolutely certain." The manager, Mr. Sterling, blinked. He looked at the accuser, then at his employee, whose face was now ashen, his earlier arrogance completely evaporated, replaced by sheer panic. "Is this possible?" the manager asked, his voice dangerously quiet, directed at the employee. The employee could only manage a weak, trembling nod, unable to form words. Sterling's face hardened, disbelief giving way to controlled fury. His eyes, like chips of ice, bore into the employee. "You stood here," he hissed, keeping his voice low but letting the venom drip. "And you treated Tom Cruise, the Tom Cruise, like some vagrant off the street? Do you have any comprehension of who you just insulted? Of the damage you may have just inflicted on this establishment?" Panic finally spurred the employee into action. With a strangled cry, he bolted towards the entrance, nearly tripping over an antique display stand in his haste. "Mr. Cruise, sir, wait, please," he yelled desperately, reaching the door just as Cruise was stepping out onto the bustling sidewalk. Cruise stopped, turned slowly, his expression unreadable beneath the shadow of his cap. He regarded the frantic, red-faced employee with a profound, almost weary calm. I am so unbelievably sorry, sir," the employee gasped, stumbling over his words, wringing his hands. I didn't recognize you. I had no idea. Please forgive my atrocious behavior. It was unacceptable, unforgivable." Cruise tilted his head slightly, his gaze piercing. "So," he asked, his voice quiet, yet carrying clearly over the street noise, "I only deserve respect if you know who I am? If I wear the right clothes?" The employee flinched, stammering incoherently. The manager had arrived beside him now, his face a mask of mortification and controlled anger directed at his subordinate. "Mr. Cruise," Sterling interjected smoothly, stepping forward. "On behalf of AUM, please accept my deepest, most sincere apologies for this employee's deplorable conduct. It in no way reflects our standards or values. Allow us to make amends. Anything in the store, please, as our guest." Cruise's gaze shifted briefly to the manager, acknowledging him with a slight nod, then returned to the utterly shame-faced employee. "You decided I wasn't worthy," he stated simply, the lack of anger making the words hit harder. "Not worthy of courtesy. Not worthy of seeing a watch." He paused, letting the weight of the judgment settle. He took a step back, adjusting his cap one last time. "The problem isn't the watch. It isn't me." His eyes held the employees for a final, impactful moment. "It's the choices you make about who you are." He offered a curt, almost imperceptible nod towards the manager. "Good luck with your brand values." And then, without a backward glance, Tom Cruise turned and melted into the anonymity of the city crowd, leaving behind a tableau of shock, shame, and dawning professional dread. Hours later, the afternoon sun casting long shadows, Tom Cruise found himself in a different part of the city, standing before a small, unassuming shop tucked between a bakery and an antiquarian bookstore. The sign, painted in faded gold lettering on weathered wood, read simply, "Time and Value." Pushing open the door, he was greeted not by a sterile hush, but by the gentle, rhythmic ticking of dozens of clocks and the faint, pleasant scent of old wood, beeswax, and metal polish. Shelves lined the walls, crammed with timepieces of all shapes and sizes. Elegant grandfather clocks stood sentinel in corners. Intricate cuckoo clocks awaited their hourly performance, and glass cabinets displayed pocket watches, marine chronometers, and vintage wristwatches, each with a story hinted at by its patina and design. There was no marble, no intimidating spotlights, just a sense of quiet passion and history. Behind a sturdy wooden counter cluttered with tiny tools and watch parts stood an elderly man. His hair was white and wispy, his face kind, etched with the fine lines of age and concentration, and his eyes, magnified slightly by round, wire-rimmed glasses, held a spark of warmth and intelligence. He looked up from the delicate mechanism he was working on and offered Cruise a genuine, unforced smile. "Good afternoon," he said, his voice gentle. "Welcome to Time and Value. Looking for anything special, or just admiring the passage of time?" Cruise felt the tension that had unknowingly lingered since the AUM encounter finally dissipate. He returned the smile easily. "Something special, I hope," he replied, approaching the counter. "Something with significance." The elderly salesperson, whose nameplate identified him as Samuel, nodded thoughtfully. He didn't ask about budget, didn't size up Cruise's simple attire. He simply listened. "Significance," he mused. "That can mean many things." He spent the next hour patiently showing Cruise various pieces, sharing their histories, explaining the intricacies of their movements with infectious enthusiasm. He spoke of escapements and jewels, of wartime provenance and peacetime elegance, his knowledge deep and his passion evident. Finally, from a velvet-lined drawer beneath the counter, he produced a pocket watch. It was beautiful, but understated, a heavy hunter-cased piece in aged silver, its cover smooth and undecorated, save for a small, empty cartouche. Samuel pressed a small latch, and the cover sprang open. The enamel dial was clean, classic, with elegant Roman numerals. But it was the inside of the cover that drew Cruise's eye. Engraved in delicate flowing script was a Latin phrase, "Tempus fugit, amor manet." "Time flies, love remains," Samuel translated softly, anticipating the question. A popular sentiment on pieces from the late 19th century. This one has kept good time for over 100 years. Simple, reliable, but tells a story, doesn't it? Cruise held the watch in his hand, feeling its cool weight, the smooth surface of the silver, the quiet ticking against his palm. He traced the engraving with his fingertip. This felt real, authentic, imbued with value far beyond its material worth. A slow, genuine smile spread across his face, reaching his eyes. "It's perfect," he said quietly. "This is exactly what I was looking for." Back at AUM, the atmosphere remained thick with unspoken tension. Mr. Sterling had gathered the entire staff in the main showroom after closing. The disgraced employee stood slightly apart, unable to meet anyone's eye. Sterling held a small, simple note card. "Before Mr. Cruise left," he announced, his voice resonating with controlled anger. He left this with the concierge. He cleared his throat and read aloud. "Respect is the true luxury. It doesn't cost anything, yet it's worth everything. It doesn't matter what you sell, only how you choose to treat people. That defines your value and your brands. The silence that followed was profound. Sterling fixed his gaze on the employee responsible. This store, he continued, his voice low and intense, is built on more than gold and diamonds. It's built on reputation, discretion, and unparalleled service. Today, that reputation was severely compromised, not by a faulty product, but by a catastrophic failure of basic human decency. I expect every single one of you to reflect on this. As for you, he addressed the employee directly, you will reconsider everything you think you know about service, about respect, about judging others. If you cannot fundamentally learn from this monumental error, there is no future for you at AUM. Months melted into a year. The employee no longer worked at AUM. He'd found a position at a modest, family-run jewelry store in a quiet suburban neighborhood, far from the high-pressure world of elite luxury. The experience had been deeply humbling, scarring even, but ultimately transformative. One rainy afternoon, a customer entered, shaking water from a simple coat, dressed unremarkably. The old habits, the ingrained prejudices, flickered for a nanosecond before being consciously extinguished. The employee met the customer's eyes and offered a warm, genuine smile, remembering the cold blue eyes that had assessed him so calmly, so devastatingly. "Welcome," he said sincerely. "How can I help you today?" He didn't know who the customer was, and for the first time, he truly understood that it didn't matter.